The storm had arrived suddenly, its ferocity unlike anything Leo had expected. The wind howled through the trees outside, shaking the small cabin he had been assigned to on the alien planet. Leo pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders as he looked out the window. The sky was dark, filled with thick clouds, and the rain lashed against the glass, turning the landscape into a blur of gray. It was a typical night on the outer rim of space, far away from Earth and civilization, where nothing but the wilderness and the elements existed. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled softly in the corner. Leo sat at the small table, wiping down his equipment, making sure everything was in order for the mission ahead. His thoughts drifted for a moment to the mission that had brought him here, a routine survey of the planet, a job to collect data on the wildlife and plant life. But as the storm grew fiercer, he realized that he had been in isolation for far too long. He missed the company of others, even the small talk and the noise of a crowded station. Just as he sighed and pushed his work aside, he heard a soft sound at the door. A light knock, almost hesitant. Leo rose from the table, confused. Who would be out in such weather? His instincts told him to be cautious. He reached for his blaster, the weapon cold in his hand as he approached the door. The knock came again, more urgently this time. He steadied himself, pushing the door open cautiously. The sight that met his eyes left him speechless. Standing in the doorway, drenched and clearly exhausted, was a woman. She was unlike any human woman he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered faintly under the dim light, almost as if her body reflected the surrounding atmosphere. Her long, dark hair clung to her face and shoulders, wet from the rain. Her eyes, a deep violet, seemed to glow faintly as she met his gaze. The woman didn't speak at first. She seemed unsure, looking over Leo's shoulder into the cabin, as if debating whether she should enter. The storm outside raged, louder now, and Leo could hear the howling winds over the noise of the rain pounding on the roof. "Are you all right?" Leo finally managed to ask. His voice came out rough, as though he hadn't spoken in days. The woman nodded slowly, her lips trembling. "Please," she said, her voice soft but desperate. "I need shelter. Just for a while. I can't stay out there." Leo stepped aside without thinking. The Pelio could sense her fear, but there was something else too, something he couldn't quite place. There was a sadness in her eyes, a weight she carried. He set his blaster down on the counter and reached for a blanket from the shelf. "Sit down," he instructed, his voice calm. "I'll get you something warm." Alyssa nodded and slowly sank onto the small couch, her body still trembling from the cold. She wrapped the blanket around herself, but her gaze never left Leo. There was something unnerving about the way she looked at him, as though she saw through him. He tried to ignore the feeling, focusing instead on making her comfortable. The fire crackled and warmed the room, but the tension between them was palpable. Leo kept his distance, unsure of how to act around this strange woman who had appeared out of nowhere. He had no idea who she was, why she was here, or what she wanted. The only thing he was certain of was that she needed help, and that was enough for him to set his confusion aside. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The storm outside still roared, but the cabin was quiet, save for the crackling of the fire and the soft breathing of the woman on the couch. Leo glanced at her once more. Her violet eyes glistened in the dim light, and she was staring at him, as if waiting for him to say something. "What are you doing out there in this storm?" Leo asked, trying to break the silence. Alyssa looked down at her hands, which were still shaking. She didn't answer immediately, her thoughts distant. Finally she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "I was running from something. From someone. They would never stop until they find me." Leo felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The air in the room seemed to shift, growing heavier. He didn't know what she meant, but the fear in her voice was undeniable. Whatever she was running from, it was real. Before he could ask more, she closed her eyes and let out a deep breath, as though she had been carrying a weight far too long. She looked exhausted, but there was still a fire inside her, a determination Leo couldn't ignore. "I didn't know where else to go," she added softly, almost to herself. "But I've heard stories about humans, stories of strength. I thought maybe you could help." Leo stared at her, unsure of what he was hearing. This woman, this alien, was asking for his help. The question was why? And why now, in the middle of a storm, of all times? But as he looked into her eyes, Leo felt a strange sense of connection, something unspoken between them. He didn't know what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. This night, this encounter, would change everything. The storm outside may have been fierce, but it was nothing compared to the storm that was about to come into Leo's life. The next morning, Leo woke to find the cabin quiet, the storm outside now just a faint rumble in the distance. The sun had risen, casting soft golden light through the windows. He blinked, trying to shake off the lingering exhaustion from the long night. He had hardly slept at all, his mind still racing over the strange events of the previous evening. The woman, Elisa, had slipped into his bed during the storm, seeking shelter, and now she was still asleep on the couch. Leo sat up slowly, rubbing his face. The warmth of the fire had made the room feel comforting, but the tension between him and Elisa was undeniable. He didn't know who she was or why she had come here, but there was something about her that made him feel uneasy, yet drawn to her at the same time. Elisa nodded, her eyes scanning the cabin before settling on him again. "Thank you for letting me stay," she said, her voice sincere. "I didn't know where else to go." Leo set down the small bowl of food he had been preparing and walked over to her. "You're welcome," he said, trying to keep things casual. "But why me? Why come to me for help?" Elisa hesitated for a moment, her gaze dropping to her hands in her lap. She seemed to be gathering her thoughts. Finally, she looked up at Leo, her eyes filled with a sadness he couldn't quite understand. "I've been running for weeks," she began. "From a war, from my own people. I didn't know who else I could trust. I thought you might understand." Leo's curiosity grew. "What do you mean, from your own people?" Elisa took a deep breath, as if the weight of her words was heavy on her chest. "I come from a royal family far from here. My people are at war with each other, and I was caught in the middle. My enemies want me dead, but they can't find me if I stay hidden." She paused, as though she didn't want to reveal too much. "I had to leave. I had to survive." Leo felt a pang of sympathy for her, but he couldn't help but feel skeptical. It wasn't uncommon for alien species to be caught in political strife, but her story felt different. She wasn't just running from a war. She was running from something or someone very specific. "So you came to me for help?" Leo asked, his voice still unsure. "Why not someone else?" Elisa's eyes met his, and there was a flicker of something, fear, perhaps, or uncertainty in her expression. "I've heard stories about humans," she said softly. "Stories of how you stand against the odds, how you fight for what's right. I thought maybe you could help me." Leo was quiet for a moment, letting her words sink in. He wasn't used to being seen as a symbol of hope, especially by an alien. His job was to protect, yes, but to be the hero of someone else's story? That was new. He didn't know what he could do to help her. He was just a soldier, stuck on a far-off planet, with no way of contacting his superiors or getting backup. But there was something in her eyes that made him want to help. Elisa had trusted him, and that trust meant something. "I don't know what I can do," Leo said honestly. I'm just one man, stuck here, but I'll listen. If there's something I can do, I'll try." Elisa gave him a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," she said. "You don't know what this means to me." As they sat there, the morning sun warming the cabin, Leo felt a new kind of responsibility. He didn't fully understand what was going on, but Alyssa's story was more than just a tale of survival. It was a plea for help. And Leo wasn't the kind of person to turn his back on someone in need. He might not have all the answers, but he would find a way to help her. The storm outside had passed, but the real storm, the one that threatened both of their lives, was just beginning. Leo sat quietly across from Alyssa, both of them now fully awake, the tension in the room still thick. The sun had risen high enough to cast warm light through the cabin, but it didn't seem to reach the cold corner of Leo's mind. His thoughts were racing, trying to make sense of everything that had happened since the storm arrived. Alyssa's story was unsettling, yet there was something about her calmness despite the gravity of her words that kept him from turning her away. He couldn't help but be drawn to her. She wasn't just a frightened alien woman who had stumbled into his cabin. She was running from something much bigger, and whatever that was, it was coming for her. "Tell me more," Leo said, breaking the silence. He couldn't stop himself from wanting to know everything about her situation. "You said your people are at war, but why are they after you? You don't look like you're—" "Like I'm part of it?" Alyssa finished for him, her voice soft but firm. She folded her arms across her chest, her eyes distant as if thinking back to a time she would rather forget. "I was part of the royal family. I wasn't supposed to get involved in politics, but I saw things, learned things that I shouldn't have. Things that could destroy my people if they're ever revealed." Leo frowned, trying to follow her story. "You mean you know something important? Something your people don't want anyone to know?" She nodded slowly, her gaze locked onto the floor. "Yes, but it's not just about the secret. It's about the power struggle, the betrayal. The war is about control. My family, my own blood wants to use the secret I know for their own gain. And when I refused to help them, I became a target." Leo could see the pain in her eyes, the weight of the burden she carried. She wasn't just a pawn in a political game. She was caught in something far more dangerous. The fear in her voice was real, and it made Leo want to protect her, but he had no idea how. He was just one man. What could he possibly do against a whole faction of enemies? "So you ran," Leo said, his voice quieter now. "You left everything behind." Elisa's eyes met his, and there was a flicker of something in them. Was it regret or something else? "I didn't have a choice. I had to leave before they could get to me, before they could make me do something I didn't want to do." Leo was silent for a moment. He didn't know how it felt to be a royal, to have all that power, but he could understand what it was like to have your life torn apart by war. He had seen it countless times in his own world, people fighting for control, for resources, for their own survival. But this was different. Elisa wasn't just another casualty of war. She was someone with knowledge that could change everything. "Why come to me?" Leo asked again, the question that had been on his mind since the moment she stepped into his cabin. "Why not someone else? You could have gone to your people, or even—" "I didn't have anyone else to trust," she interrupted, her voice strained. "I heard stories of humans, how they fight against impossible odds, how they protect the weak. I thought maybe you would help me. I didn't know who else to turn to." Her words struck a chord with Leo. He wasn't sure why she would think of humans that way, especially with all the alien races out there who saw humanity as nothing more than a nuisance. But it was clear that Alyssa was desperate. And she had seen something in him that he hadn't even realized was there, something worth trusting. Leo let out a slow breath. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't the type of person to go out of his way, to get involved in other people's wars, especially alien ones. But Elissa wasn't just some alien soldier or political figure. She was someone who had been forced into a corner, someone who needed help. And despite all his doubts, despite the nagging voice in his head telling him to stay away, Leo knew he couldn't turn her down. "I don't know what I can do," Leo said finally, his voice steady. "But I'll help you. I'll figure out a way." Elisa's eyes softened, and a small, grateful smile tugged at her lips. "Thank you," she whispered. "I didn't think anyone would." Leo raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What is it?" She hesitated, then met his gaze. "It's an artifact, a weapon that's been hidden away for centuries. If I can find it, I can stop this war. I can stop my people from destroying themselves. But I need your help to do it." Leo didn't know what to say. An ancient weapon? It sounded like something out of a history book. But Elissa's urgency made him believe her. She wasn't lying. She wasn't just asking for help out of convenience, she needed him. And despite his reservations, Leo knew he couldn't back out now. "We'll find it," Leo said firmly. "We'll find this artifact." And just like that, the decision was made. Whatever it took, whatever danger lay ahead, Leo had made up his mind. He was going to help Elissa, no matter the cost. The days that followed were filled with travel and preparation. Leo and Elissa had made a plan to find the artifact she spoke of. They couldn't afford to waste time. Every minute was a risk, and they both knew it. As they traveled deeper into the jungle, the landscape grew more treacherous. Thick vines and dense trees surrounded them, blocking their path, and strange sounds echoed in the distance, creatures that seemed to be watching them from the shadows. Leo's military training helped them navigate through the dense forest. He was used to difficult terrains, but this alien world felt different. There was something unfamiliar about it, something that kept him on edge. Elissa moved with quiet grace beside him, her steps light despite the rough conditions. She was no longer the frightened woman who had stumbled into his cabin. She was focused now, her eyes fixed ahead, a determination in her every movement. As they moved forward, Leo couldn't help but wonder more about the artifact she was seeking. What kind of weapon could be so powerful that it could end a war and change the fate of an entire species? Elissa had told him that the artifact was hidden in a secret location, but she didn't know exactly where it was. The only thing she had was a map, ancient and worn, that showed a vague trail leading to a temple in the heart of the jungle. The problem was that the map wasn't easy to read. There were symbols on it that Elissa didn't fully understand, symbols that had been lost to her people for generations. That's where Leo came in. As an expert in it, Leo nodded but didn't say anything. He was used to the silence of the wilderness, but the quiet between them was different. He could feel the weight of the situation growing heavier with each passing day. They were no longer just two strangers lost in a storm. They were on a mission, one that could change the course of Elissa's war, and maybe even the future of her people. They sat together in silence as the fire crackled. The night was still, and for a moment, it almost felt like the world around them had paused. But Leo couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. He glanced around the clearing, trying to ignore the unsettling feeling that something was watching them. He knew it was probably just his nerves, the tension of their journey weighing on him, but he couldn't help the feeling of unease. As if on cue, Elissa stood up suddenly, her eyes scanning the trees. "We're not alone," she whispered, her voice urgent. "Someone's out there." Leo immediately stood up, his hand reaching for the blaster at his side. He hadn't heard anything, but Elissa's reaction told him she wasn't imagining things. They both stayed perfectly still, listening for any sounds that might indicate danger. The wind rustled the leaves above them, but there was no other noise. Nothing that should have alarmed them. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Leo caught movement. A figure stepped from the shadows, moving with the speed and grace of a predator. Leo's heart skipped a beat. His hand tightened around his weapon. "Ready to defend." "Who's there?" he called out, his voice steady but firm. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, it stepped closer, revealing itself as a tall, imposing alien figure. Its skin was dark, like stone, and its eyes glowed faintly in the low light. The creature wore heavy armor, and its stance was that of someone used to battle. Alyssa's face went pale as she recognized the figure. "No," she whispered under her breath. Leo turned to her, his heart racing. "What is it?" "It's one of them," she said quietly, her voice filled with dread. "One of my people. A soldier." "Sent to stop me?" Leo's grip tightened on his weapon, ready for a fight. He had no idea what kind of threat they were facing, but he could tell from Alyssa's reaction that this wasn't just some casual encounter. This was serious. The soldier stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Alyssa. "You've come too far, Alyssa," he said in a deep, gravelly voice. "Your mission ends here." Alyssa stepped back, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. "I won't go back," she said firmly. "I'm not going to help you or anyone else destroy my people." The soldier didn't move, but his eyes darkened. "Then you leave me no choice." Leo instinctively raised his blaster, aiming at the soldier. But Alyssa stepped in front of him, blocking his shot. "No, Leo," she said urgently. "I don't want you to fight him. He's my responsibility." The tension in the air was thick, and Leo could see Alyssa was torn. She didn't want him to get involved in this, but he couldn't just stand by and let her face this alone. She needed help, whether she realized it or not. "Elisa," Leo said, his voice low but determined. "We don't have to do this. We can keep moving, find the artifact, and end this war. We're not alone anymore." Alyssa looked at him, her eyes filled with doubt. But for the first time in days, she seemed to consider the possibility that they could fight this together. The soldier stood there, unmoving, waiting for Alyssa's decision. The standoff in the clearing lasted only a few moments, but to Leo, it felt like an eternity. Alyssa stood in front of him, her eyes locked on the soldier, a quiet determination in her gaze. Leo's grip tightened around his blaster, but he kept it lowered, his eyes shifting between Alyssa and the soldier. The tension in the air was almost palpable, and he could feel his heart pounding in his chest. The soldier didn't move. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound. He just stared at Alyssa, waiting for her to make a decision. His stance was firm, like someone who had seen countless battles and wasn't afraid of a fight. Alyssa, on the other hand, seemed torn, as if she wasn't sure how to handle this. "I don't want to fight you," she said finally, her voice quiet but steady. "But I won't go back with you. You know why." The soldier's expression remained unchanged. "You don't understand, Alyssa. The war is bigger than you. You can't stop it. You don't even know what you're dealing with." "I know enough," she replied, her voice firm. "I know what I've seen, and I can't let my people destroy themselves over power and lies." Leo felt the weight of the conversation pressing down on him. He wanted to help, wanted to do something, but he knew he couldn't interfere. This was Alyssa's fight, and he had to trust her to handle it. Yet there was something about the soldier's cold confidence that made him uneasy. He wasn't sure how far this would go before things escalated. The soldier took a step forward, his gaze never leaving Alyssa. "You're a fool to think you can stop this. They'll come for you, Alyssa. They'll come for both of you." Alyssa didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped back, turning slightly to look at Leo. She didn't need to say anything. Her eyes told him everything. She was determined, but she also knew the danger they were in. "We can't fight him," Alyssa said quietly, her voice calm but filled with regret. "But I won't give up." Leo understood. They had no choice. They needed to keep moving, to find the artifact before it was too late. If they stayed, the soldier would just keep following them, and there was no telling what might happen next. They couldn't afford to be caught in a confrontation they couldn't win. Without saying another word, Alyssa turned and began walking toward the edge of the clearing, heading for the path that would take them deeper into the jungle. Leo hesitated. For a moment, looking back at the soldier who hadn't moved. The soldier's cold stare remained fixed on Alyssa's back, but he didn't make a move to stop them. Leo followed her, his heart still racing. They had made the right decision. He knew that. But as they disappeared into the dense jungle, the weight of the moment lingered. Alyssa was right. The soldier would never stop hunting her. But they had one advantage. They were one step ahead. The jungle became darker as they moved deeper into the trees, the shadows stretching long as the sun set behind the horizon. Leo kept his eyes peeled for any sign of movement, but so far it had been quiet. Alyssa didn't speak much, but Leo could sense the tension in her. She was trying to keep her emotions in check, but it was clear that the soldier's presence had shaken her more than she was willing to admit. After a while, they reached a small stream. Alyssa crouched down to take a drink, her movements quick but careful. Leo followed suit, keeping an eye on their surroundings. They couldn't afford to relax, not yet. There were still dangers lurking in the jungle, and they had to stay focused. "I didn't think he'd find us so soon," Alyssa said after a moment, her voice soft. "I thought we had more time." "We're getting closer to the temple," Leo said, trying to keep his voice steady. "We're almost there. We just need to keep moving." Alyssa nodded, but didn't say anything else. They both knew that time was running out. Every step they took, every decision they made, brought them closer to the artifact and the war that awaited them. But they were also running out of time. The soldier would be back, and others like him would follow. As they continued down the stream, Leo couldn't help but think about the artifact. Alyssa had mentioned it many times, but he still didn't fully understand its importance. What kind of power could it hold? And why was it so vital to her people's survival? If it was truly the key to ending the war, then it was more important than either of them realized. "We need to be careful," Alyssa said suddenly, breaking the silence. "There are others out there looking for us." Leo's mind raced. He had known they were being hunted, but hearing her say it aloud made it feel more real. "How many?" he asked, his voice low. "I don't know. A few, maybe more. But the longer we stay in one place, the more likely we are to be caught." Leo nodded, his jaw tightening. They couldn't afford to be caught. Not now. Not when they were so close. "Let's keep moving," he said, standing up. "We'll get there. We'll find the artifact and end this." Alyssa stood beside him, her expression determined. "Together," she said, her voice strong. Leo gave her a quick nod, and together, they moved forward once more. The jungle felt darker now, the shadows closing in around them, but they didn't stop. They couldn't, not when everything was on the line. The jungle seemed to grow even more oppressive as Leo and Alyssa made their way through the dense undergrowth. Every step felt like it brought them closer to the artifact, yet the weight of the danger never left them. The air was thick with humidity, and the sounds of the jungle were almost deafening, chirps, rustles, and distant growls all blending together in a constant symphony of life. Yet despite the noise, there was a heavy silence between Leo and Alyssa. They were both focused on the task ahead, knowing that the slightest mistake could cost them everything. After hours of walking, they reached a narrow path that cut through the jungle. The vegetation here was less dense, but the air felt colder. Alyssa slowed her pace, her eyes scanning the surroundings with a mix of fear and determination. She had been quiet for the past hour, lost in her thoughts. Leo could tell she was tired, but she refused to show it. She kept moving forward one step at a time, her resolve unbroken. "Are we close?" Leo asked, his voice breaking the silence. Alyssa nodded but didn't answer right away. She was studying the map once more, her brow furrowed as she traced the ancient symbols with her fingers. "We should be. The temple is just up ahead according to the map." Leo looked around, his hand resting on the hilt of his blaster. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something was lurking just out of sight. But there was no time to second guess. They had to keep moving. He glanced at Elisa, who seemed lost in thought. She was tense, her body, language betraying the pressure she was under. Leo understood that. The artifact was the key to everything for her. Her people's survival, her own freedom. It was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of hope. They pushed on, following the narrow path as it wound through the jungle. The temperature seemed to drop, and the once crushing humidity now felt like a biting chill. Leo pulled his jacket tighter around his shoulders, but it did little to ward off the unease creeping up his spine. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached a clearing. In the center stood a massive structure, half buried in the earth, covered in vines and moss. The temple. Its stone walls rose up in front of them, imposing and ancient, with intricate carvings etched into the surface. The air around it felt thick with history, with power. Alyssa stepped forward, her eyes wide with awe and fear combined. This was it. This was the place she had been searching for. Leo felt a knot form in his stomach as he looked at the temple. There was something about it that felt wrong. The dark stone, the carvings that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. Everything about the temple felt alive in a way he couldn't explain. "This is it," Alyssa said, her voice barely a whisper. "The artifact is inside. We just need to find it." Leo nodded but didn't move. Something wasn't right. His instincts were screaming at him to be cautious, but Alyssa was already making her way toward the entrance, pushing aside the overgrown vines that covered the entrance. She glanced back at him, her face filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "Leo," she said softly, "this is our only chance. We can end the war. We can stop them. Please trust me." Leo hesitated. He wanted to trust her. He had come this far and he had seen her strength, her determination. But he also knew the stakes. If they weren't careful, everything they had worked for could fall apart in an instant. "I trust you," he said finally, his voice steady. "But we need to be ready for anything." Alyssa gave him a quick, grateful smile, and together they entered the temple. The inside was dark, the air cool and stale. As their eyes adjusted, Leo could make out the faint outlines of ancient statues and carvings on the walls. The air smelled of old stone and decay, as if the temple had been abandoned for centuries. Yet, there was an undeniable feeling of energy here, something ancient, something powerful. Alyssa led the way, her movements careful but determined. She didn't speak, but Leo could see the tension in her body. She was close now, so close to the artifact. He could feel it too. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, and every step felt like they were getting closer to something both dangerous and important. As they reached the center of the temple, Leo saw a large stone pedestal in the middle of the room. On it, an object sat covered in a layer of dust and dirt. Alyssa rushed toward it, her heart racing. She knelt down in front of it, her hands trembling as she brushed away the debris. What she uncovered was an ancient chest, its surface engraved, with symbols Leo couldn't read. Alyssa's eyes filled with a mixture of awe and fear as she slowly opened it. Inside was a small, intricately carved box. Alyssa's breath caught in her throat as she lifted it from the chest, her fingers trembling with anticipation. The box felt heavy in her hands, as though it contained the weight of an entire world. She stared at it for a long moment, her mind racing. This was it, the artifact, the key to ending the war. But as she held the box, Leo heard something behind them. A soft shuffle, the unmistakable sound of movement. His heart skipped a beat and he spun around, blaster in hand, but it was too late. From the shadows of the temple, a figure stepped into the light. It was the soldier, the one who had followed them through the jungle, Alyssa's enemy. Did you really think you could escape? The soldier's voice was cold, filled with malice. This ends now! Leo raised his weapon, his finger on the trigger, but Alyssa stepped forward, placing herself between Leo and the soldier. No, she said, her voice strong. This ends here. Not with violence, but with the truth. Leo watched as Alyssa faced the soldier, her hand still clutching the artifact. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. For the first time, she believed in the strength she had been hiding all along. The soldier hesitated, his eyes narrowing. You think this little box can change anything? You are nothing but a traitor to your people. Alyssa's gaze didn't waver. I'm trying to save them. And in that moment, Leo realized that Alyssa wasn't just fighting for her people's future. She was fighting for the future of everyone, for a chance to break the cycle of war and betrayal. And he would stand by her, no matter what came next. The tension in the air was thick, like a storm waiting to break. Alyssa stood firm between Leo and the soldier, her hands still clutching the small box that could change everything. The soldier was motionless, his eyes burning with cold fury as he watched her. But there was something in his stance that suggested doubt. For the first time, Alyssa didn't feel afraid. The fear that had haunted her for so long seemed to melt away, replaced by the strength she had always carried deep inside. I'm not going back, Alyssa said, her voice calm but unwavering. You can't force me. Not this time. The soldier's lips twisted into a sneer, but he didn't move closer. You don't understand what you're doing, he said, his voice low and threatening. This artifact, this power, it belongs to the people, not to you. You have no right to it. I have every right, Alyssa replied firmly, her grip on the box tightening. It's the key to ending the war, to ending the destruction. My people have been fighting for too long. This doesn't have to be the end. The soldier's eyes flickered for a moment, a brief flash of something that might have been regret. But it was gone as quickly as it came. He stepped forward, his hand reaching for the weapon at his side, but Leo was faster. He raised his blaster and aimed it at the soldier, his finger ready on the trigger. Stay back, Leo warned, his voice steady. You don't want this fight. The soldier stopped, his hand hovering over his weapon. He glared at Leo, then shifted his gaze back to Alyssa. You think this box will save you? You think it will save anyone? His voice grew colder, harder. Your people will never accept you. They will hunt you down until you're dead, and they will use this artifact to destroy everything you've tried to build. Alyssa's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't flinch. She had heard these words before from those who wanted to control her, who saw her as nothing more than a pawn. But now, she wasn't afraid. She was stronger than she had ever been, and for the first time in a long time, she felt as though she had a purpose beyond survival. I'm not afraid anymore, she said, her voice clear and strong. I'm not running. This is my fight. Now! The soldier's hand dropped from his weapon. For a moment, there was silence, heavy, expectant. Leo could feel the air around them thickening, the weight of the decision they all faced. He knew they couldn't stay in the temple forever. The longer they were there, the more likely it was that others would come. But he also knew that Alyssa couldn't back down now, not when she had come so far. The soldier took a slow step back, his eyes never leaving Alyssa. You don't know what you're doing, he said, his voice tinged with something close to pity. But if you truly believe in this, then go ahead. But know this. You're not the one who will change anything. You're just a tool a tool being used by forces much bigger than you. Alyssa didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her actions spoke louder than any words could. She turned away from the soldier, walking past him toward the stone pedestal, in the center of the temple. Leo stayed close behind her, his hand never straying too far from his blaster. The soldier didn't stop them. Alyssa placed the box carefully on the pedestal, her fingers lingering over it for just a moment. She closed her eyes, as if feeling the weight of what she was about to do. The air in the room seemed to shift, the atmosphere growing heavier, as if the temple itself was watching. Alyssa opened her eyes, and for the first time, Leo saw the full force of her determination. She wasn't just a woman trying to survive anymore. She was someone who had accepted her role in all of this, a leader, a beacon of hope for her people. With a deep breath, Alyssa opened the box. Inside was a small crystal, glowing faintly with a soft, inner light. It looked ancient, almost fragile, yet it held a power that Leo couldn't fully comprehend. As she lifted it from the box, the entire temple seemed to hum, like it was alive, resonating with the energy contained within the crystal. Alyssa held it tightly in her hands, her eyes reflecting the light from the crystal, as if it were filling her with strength. "This is it," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "The power to stop the war, to save my people." Leo stood beside her, feeling the weight of the moment. He had never seen anything like this, an artifact that could change the course of history. But as powerful as it was, he knew it wasn't the crystal itself that made Alyssa so strong. It was her. It was her belief in what she was fighting for, her resolve to make a difference in a world torn apart by war. The soldier stepped forward again, his expression hardening. "You still don't understand, do you?" he said, his voice filled with bitterness. "You can't change anything. Not like this. Your people will never accept you. They will destroy you for this." Alyssa turned to face him, her eyes unwavering. "Then I'll fight for them. I'll fight for what's right, and I'll fight for peace, no matter what it takes." The soldier didn't move. He just stood there, his gaze fixed on her, but there was no more anger in his eyes, just a deep, unspoken understanding. He knew he couldn't stop her, and for the first time, Leo realized that Alyssa wasn't just fighting for her people. She was fighting for herself, too, for the future she believed in, for the possibility of a world where peace could finally take root. "We're not done yet," Alyssa said, her voice filled with quiet strength. "But this is just the beginning." As they turned to leave the temple, Leo couldn't help but feel that they had crossed a line, one that could never be uncrossed. They had the artifact, and now they had a chance. But the road ahead would not be easy. There would be battles to fight, enemies to face, and sacrifices to make. But as long as Alyssa was by his side, Leo knew they could change the future.